Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Thank you for joining our weekly live podcast interview. Today's topic that we're going to cover here today is explaining digital transformation to your grandmother. We're going to explain in just a moment what we mean by that. We'll come back to that in a moment, but that is the topic for today. I'm going to introduce our guest in just a moment. But first, let me cover a couple of logistical things before we dive in. First of all, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journey. So we help clients select, plan for, and implement various enterprise technologies, including ERP, CRM, supply chain systems, HR, tech, all that good stuff. So that's what we do. That's what I do. This is a weekly live podcast interview that we do on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or X, I should say. So we ask you to submit any questions you might have along the way. We'd love to hear your questions. And that's why we do these interviews live, is so that we can get your comments and your questions as well. So I thank you in advance for that. We actually use this interview to become part of our Transformation Ground Control podcast. It's a weekly podcast we publish each week. So we'll interview here today with you live. We'll add some content, we'll edit it, and then we'll release it formally as a podcast episode here in about 2 weeks. You can see that podcast on whatever platform you prefer by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So be sure to check that out. You can also see past episodes of the show at that same website as well. And then lastly, I mentioned a moment ago that we're going to take audience questions here as we get to our guest. So I encourage you to drop any of those questions in the chat. But in the meantime, if you don't mind dropping in the chat, wherever you're listening or watching here today, we've got an eye on all the streams here. Just drop in the chat what city and country you're joining from, if you don't mind. We tend to draw a global audience. So I always love to see where everyone is joining from here today. So drop in the chat what city and country you're from. I myself am in rural Pennsylvania here today. This is where we're filming. Our guest here is from the UK. I'll let him introduce himself and where he's at here in just a moment. So drop in the chat if you don't mind where you're from. And again, today's topic is explaining digital transformation to your grandmother. We're going to try and simplify digital transformation. Digital transformations can be complex. They can be overwhelming. There's a lot of moving parts, but they don't always have to be that complex. And that's what we're going to try and do here today, is really simplify this. And I don't want to say dumb it down, but just bring it down to earth, to some real basic concepts here today. And helping me in this conversation is Bret Robinson from a company called Data Worx Global. So Bret, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, glad to have you here. And first time you and I have had a chance to chat in this sort of format. So thanks for being here. Before we jump in and I start asking you a bunch of questions, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you grew up in this space, as well as Data Worx Global and what you guys do.
Sure. So, Bret Robinson, I was in the United States Air Force back in the 80s, and I was an aircraft engineer, always testing, always dealing with, all the schematics and things of an aircraft. They started going digital, so they asked me to do a lot of the data aspects of that and the collection. Only because I dislocated my knee playing softball and I had nothing else to do and couldn't go on the flight line. So, they ripped my PRP from me and said, "You're office based for 8 weeks." So, and then, just kind of got into testing more and more. And, nothing's complex as an F-15 Strike Eagle, and just started moving into that. And then, just so by chance, I started on an ERP project back in 2003. And of course, the first thing is they said, well, we don't really have any data. Right. Where do I get that from? So just started going out, finding my own data. And then I found that was literally my chalice. Every single contract and job I ever went to was, from then on out, was data. And it was almost like it was calling me to sort out data. And hence now, people always sort of talk to me. I mean, I have my company, Data Worx Global, and, we go in and we sort out people's data. We make it simple. We make it painless as possible. And, I think we do, pretty good job with that. And, we can migrate from anything to anything. It's all about the data, really. And it's all about the quality of that and how you get to it and get the best data. And that's why we're here today, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And data certainly is a key part of any digital transformation. We'll dive more into that as well. I think you sort of answered this, but I'll ask it again anyway, just to dig in a little bit. But how did you end up? What made you decide, or did you decide to be in the space, or did you sort of stumble into it earlier in your post-military career?
Yeah, I think for me, it was always dealing with third-party SIs. Not all of them are the same. Please don't take me as painting and tarring everyone with the same brush. But most of the SIs I dealt with were just overcomplicating data. Oh, that's going to take 6 weeks to get that. I'm just like, look, I'm only wanting suppliers and customers and some products, so I can get started with the SIT testing. I don't need, chapter and verse transactional and all that. I'll make my own. And I think it was then that I just thought, hang on a minute, how long? And then, oh yeah, we need X number of experts. And it was like, this must be costing a fortune. And then before I knew it, I sort of looking and thinking, well, data migration tranche one, which is 30, maybe 40% if you're very lucky, was, took like 5, 6, 7 months. You're like, that should not take that long. I know this data, use the transaction SC16N and H, and I know my way around SAP data tables and things. I'm thinking there is no way that should take that long, even the connecting of it, right? So, and that's what kind of, yeah, that's, I guess that sort of thought me, hang on a second, there must be an opportunity in this space to help people, genuinely help people sort their data out. So I started, answering questions on LinkedIn, free of charge. Just what do you got? What's your situation? Let's have a quick call and just say, right, point your data migration team at this, 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 and this, and this, or your test team at this, this, and this, and you can bring that in, blah, blah, blah. Okay, see you later. And I thought, what? I should be charging for this, really. But yeah, I'm still a, yeah, let's just call me up. Let's have a chat and see if I can help. But yeah, that's kind of where I got to from there.
Right. Just a willingness and want to help make
yeah,
successful,
and not be overcharged.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of simple, it sounds so simple, right? Just do a good job. Don't overcharge.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to ask the audience this question first before I ask you, Bret, because I do want to get your take, but I also want to get sort of a knee-jerk reaction from the audience here, and I'd love to hear from the audience your answer to this question that I'll ask Bret here too. But that is, if you had to explain digital transformation to your grandmother, how would you describe it in the simplest terms? And just to back up for a second, the reason we're not picking on the grandmothers of the world here. If you are a grandparent, I don't mean any offense here. What we're trying to do is say, you know what, if we're going to simplify this for someone who's a layperson, who's not in the technology space, who's not a CIO, who's not a consultant, who doesn't do data stuff like you do, Bret, we're trying to figure out what it is that makes, how you sort of simplify the meaning of digital transformation. So I'd love to hear from the audience. If you don't mind, just drop in the chat real simply, how would you simply define what digital transformation is? And love to hear your perspective on that too, Bret.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the main things is, you got your C-suite people and they say, yeah, I'll sign a budget. And then you got your people who get to the statement of work and look through and say, oh, data is time and materials. Okay, cool. I guess I'm okay with that. And then, they don't really understand what that means. I think for me, the simplest way, you rely on your SMEs to get that information. But it really generally is, it's your core, it's your lifeblood of your company, your data. And with all this AI now, there's tons more of it, right? So if you're encouraging your staff to use AI and things like that, you're generating lots more data. And of course, as well, people are using these automations with like Make and N88, NAN and stuff like that. And they're maybe hitting your website with loads of, you don't know what's in that. It could be absolute rubbish. Maybe they're testing it. So, it's important that you understand your data, at least some people in your company, some data champions. And then it can be really, really easy. It can just be as simple as, I've got customers, I've got suppliers, I sell these products. Cool. That's 3 blocks. We need all that. We need employees, we'll need some of that as well. And it's just breaking it down and literally looking at that, just bit by bit. It's like, explaining to your grandmother, say it's like a recipe. It's a cake recipe, grandma. This is the things I need. Here's the ingredients. This is what I need. I need to make this out of it, which is going from old system to new system. And this is how I do it. So you can literally apply that analogy, in high level, as you said, Eric, not this table connects to this cable by a primary, foreign key and blah, blah, blah. Right. So, but yeah, it's literally just keeping it very, very simple. But, you got to know, your data to a point. You got to be able to answer questions. So if I asked you, out of these employees, out of these jobs, different job positions, which ones are you taking over? Oh, we don't use those anymore. Because don't forget as well, no one deletes anything in ERP. So
Mhm.
you've got stuff in there when you started. I could tell you where all your data migrations were. I could tell you when you bought a new company and brought new systems in. I could tell you all that by just looking at a couple of tables in your database.
Right. Right.
There you go.
It's interesting that you say recipe because I love that analogy. I guess I never really thought of this, but and that's why I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Which, by the way, I stole this idea from some of your thought leadership. You made a comment in passing about how to explain digital transformation to your grandmother, and that's how
Yeah.
this idea to cover this topic. But the beauty, even for you and I, people that do this every day, sometimes I think we complicate things ourselves. Because we
We
get
did.
caught up in all the details, and you start getting into all the technicalities. But if you think of it as a recipe, when we go look at a recipe, usually you're not going to challenge the recipe. You might over time like learn to tweak it and sort of create your own little spin on the recipe. But generally, you're starting with something that you're working from. But we don't do that in digital transformations. We'll do it if we're going to make dinner, at home tonight. But we don't do that when we're spending millions of dollars and years of pain and heartache on an implementation. We don't stop to think, well, what's the right recipe? So I'm curious if
Yeah.
we didn't plan on covering this topic, and I'd be curious to hear it from the audience too. But if we're to simplify digital transformation into the people, process, technology components, that a lot of people will sort of break it down into three things: there's people, there's process, there's technology, and that is digital transformation. What would the percent mix be? What if you were creating your recipe for successful digital transformation? How would you allocate the percentages of the focus on people, process, technology?
Yeah, I think for me, people for like the phase zero and the scoping element, I would encourage anyone to have your own little company get together where you discuss that. I think the people is the hugest probably amount to start with. You need to understand, you need to all be on board, you need to be all for this to push forward. Anyone that's given any ambiguities or any pushback needs to be answered and brought along because they will be important at some stage. So people, phase zero, people huge. And I think then it's about, okay, what do we know that's broken? What do we know that's wrong? Is your finance team taking 1 to 3 weeks to sort out the month end for the previous month? If they are, your master data is a little bit in a state. So you need to bring your master data in because they're going back and correcting the transactional that the master data has supplied, right? And that could be master data, it could be config data as well. So there's little elements of that, right? So you need to, I think people first, and then, your processes, what you want to change, what you want to fix. And then of course the technology, and then these things will morph into, it's more technology. And, once you get the processes developed and less process, and still people will always be at least second, on all that. You need the people, you need to keep it moving forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But yet, I agree with what you said, by the way. Most of the focus should be on people and then process and technology. But I'd say it's probably the inverse of that is the way most companies run the projects. They'll do a majority of the focus on technology, and then whatever time you have left, you might focus on some people and process behind it. So
Yeah.
why do you think that is? I mean, you and I agree, and I'm going to come to an audience comment here in a second too that is sort of validating what you and I are saying. But why, if you and I are saying this, and others might agree, why do
Yeah.
teams have trouble seeing that recipe?
I think because it's because that you don't have the vision of the technology. You can't see it where it is in your situation or in your workplace. You can't envision that. So that it's an unknown for you. It's a worrying factor. Oh my God, will it work? Will it fit? Is it going to work? I don't know. Let's go and look at the technology. Go and do, I don't know, 10 demos of different ERP applications. And by the end of it, you might have a meeting and say, what did you learn from this, this, and this? Oh, really? They just all kind of blended in at once, right? So they all came together, so I can't really distinguish. So I think that's the main thing is the unknown. I think if you're going to venture out on this, you need to hire someone like, I don't know, like myself or Eric, someone more experienced, third stage or something, just to sort of, I know some people at Dragon as well, Paul Byrne and those guys, you just sort of look and say, right, what's best for me? Here's my situation. This is what I do. Even if you got to pay for a consultant for a couple of days just to come in and say, right, I think you should look at these two bits of technology. These, I think, is going to suit your needs, right? just take the whole worry out of it, please. Stop agonizing over this, because it really isn't that difficult. Most of us professionals can look at your business, sit there and think, right, how much data you produce? Right, okay, how much are your sales? Okay, okay, I reckon you're going to need this, and maybe in the cloud, or maybe a hybrid, whichever, depending on what department you're from, whether you're government or you're just a manufacturer, depends, right? But yeah, they could tell you that and say, okay, what's your budget? Okay, right, yeah, I wouldn't go that, I'd go this. So it's that, really. Get somebody in that really knows the tech, right? Save yourself. Do what you do best. Make stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Sounds so simple. So
yeah, right.
Want to say hello to a couple audience comments here, or to a couple audience members here. Alcinda's joining from Johannesburg, South Africa. Thanks for being here today, Alcinda. We have someone joining from Ethiopia, so thank you for being here. Curious to hear where others are joining from as well. When I asked the definition of what digital transformation is in its simplest terms, Jay Holt on YouTube said, looking holistically at your IT department, defining a roadmap for today, tomorrow, and your future. So that's a good way to look at it, sort of focusing on that future state and figuring out how technology is gonna help you get there. And then this is from Alcinda again on LinkedIn. Alcinda says 50% focus on people, 20% on process, 30% on technology, and that's similar to what you were saying. Although the process and technology part, you could argue maybe that should be flipped. But I think they're directionally, without getting too caught up in slicing hairs, that sounds pretty similar to what you're saying, Brett.
Yeah, it depends on the stage, and I agree with that. That would flip once you got past the the requirements, and you're pretty solid on what you're going. Your IT department says, right, no more changes, sort of thing. So yeah, and that would flip, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as well, you need to include the business, because what we always do in this is it's IT led, right? You need to bring the business along. You need to help them understand the places where it might be a bit too IT. So again, that's why you need a couple of professional people who has that view and can talk to the business and explain to them and bring that business unit along with you, right? Because you need that. Don't lose them.
Right. Yeah, I want to say hello to James in UK, Julio in Atlanta, Georgia. Here's a follow-up question to what you were just talking about, Brett. This is a really interesting question from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, how do you strike the right balance between following the recipe and making customizations or alterations to fit your organization's needs? So how do you, what's the right balance between following a recipe versus sort of tweaking it to fit who you are as an organization or who you're trying to become?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, back in the early ECC days in the 80s, everybody thought, right, we've got an app app. We need 5 app developers. We need to customize everything. But now with the technology and like with HANA, S4 HANA, and some of the Oracle Fusion stuff and all that, it's come along so far. A lot of things now that we were tweaking with ABAP or we were creating some custom code for is now more or less just an option in the config, right? Because I think these companies who've created these, they also go out to the business and find out what's everybody doing in the manufacturing space, what's everybody doing in the aerospace industry, where I came from, so, and they kind of get the best of breed to make their product more fit those scenarios. And I think, you need to, try and keep down the limitation, but moving from the old school to the new one, there are applications that you can actually get that will go and review all of your objects, which is your code, your customizations, and it will tell you, all the changes that you need to make. And then you can sort of have a specialist look at that and say, yeah, that's all config, and okay, we need to tweak these couple of things here, right? Because we used to hard code, go to C:\/ to this server name, and here's the files over here, or this is the AL11 directory or whatever, it's all hard coded. We got to try and come away from that, because then it makes us more fluid. So we'll move into the cloud at the moment. If things change in 10 years time, we got to move on premise. Okay, it's a lot easier transition, right? So nowadays, but that's a good question. Good thing to say about that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, the topic here at hand, just for those that are just joining, this is explaining digital transformation to your grandmother. And we're trying to simplify digital transformation and talk about digital transformation in its simplest terms. We're trying to boil it down here. And so another question I have for you Bret, is what are some of the most common misconceptions that people have about digital transformations?
I think they're thinking that it's just going to be drains up. There's going to be so much upheaval. Everyone's going to be seconded to the project. How I think a common one is my SMEs have got to do a J job. Should I replace them on the project, or should I replace them in the workplace? How should I do that? I think with any firm on that particular instance, you need to probably look at getting some other people in the department to help out with their daily duties while they help out with the business. Because the one thing you always got to focus on is your SME is probably one of the most key people in the whole transformation process. They are the kingpin. And the reason is they know the business, they know the data, they know the requirements, they know what they need. They can then help with the config, and they can help with these customizations. And, oh, why do you use that? Oh, yeah, we use that because we do this and this and this. And then we need to change that. Oh, okay. So those SME people are going to be like pulled from pillar to post. And I think you need to protect them to the point that you need to try and maybe backfill them in the workplace rather than backfill them in the project, because we need those people to understand all those things I mentioned. And that's quite key, for you to have that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, what are some of the? I know we talked about the recipe here. The people,
Right, yeah.
process, technology, but what are some of the other key ingredients you need to make a transformation successful? If we're sort of building out that recipe that we were talking about a little while ago.
Yeah, I think obviously, the requirements, and there's requirements, and then there's non-functional, there's functional and non-functional requirements as well. Will I need to do performance testing and load testing and all these other different things, the types of testing. And I think as well is your business analysts. So you'll maybe have business analysts within your company. They're going to show those requirements to the SI when they show up, system integration partner. When they show up, they'll say, yeah, here's our requirements. We got those. And they're going to probably add tons more to it. Hopefully not too much, but yeah, they'll add more to it that kind of fit more in with the solution, because yours is taken more from the business. I think the requirements, the testing types, I think as well, my area is the data. What data do you use? What don't you use if you do know? Where is your data coming from? Do you get things from like FIFO, Trustpilot? Are you a drug company? Do you get outside doctors or an outside service that gives you data on new drugs and things like that? So all these different things, you need to be able to know where your data is and how that works. Because again, in that recipe under data, we might have to slot in a few different elements that we're going to need to bring to that recipe, that it doesn't fit. It's not a one size fits all. You can't take that recipe up in manufacturing and move it over to defense and say, oh, no, it's not the same. So you're going to have to adjust it according to your business model. But again, it all gets back to that senior consultant who can look at your business and think, yeah, don't forget, these senior people, they've done, I've done over 50 programs in this nature in one way or another, right? So, and Eric's probably done quite a few as well. And some of the people I mentioned earlier at Dragon and stuff probably done loads as well, right? So you need to get that professional in to give you that view and help you set up for success. As Kyler, I think, said before to me, the setup for success.
Right. Yeah. Those are really important ones. And, it's a good reminder that there's a lot of different things that go into making these projects successful. But at the same time, when you look at what it is that's required to be successful, it doesn't require, an extraordinary amount of intelligence or extraordinary amount of time or money that you don't have necessarily. It's just finding that right mix. I think that's really what we're saying here, is that if you do things smarter and if you follow the right recipe, sort of like when you're cooking. I mean, going back to that metaphor, I mean, if you're cooking and you're not and you're not following a recipe, it's probably going to take you a lot longer, and you're probably going to make a mess in the kitchen trying to just figure it out as you go. And that's unfortunately what a lot of organizations do when they could just be following a recipe that's proven to work for organization.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I want to, we've actually taken a pass at creating a sort of a recipe for how to make these projects successful. And I want to just share with you a QR code for the audience here. If you want to download it, we have a book out that we put out that is Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. And we take 20 things. We have a recipe of about 20 things that organizations need to do to be successful in their projects. So I encourage you to download this ebook. You can get it for free on our website. It's called Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. A lot of what we're talking about here today is outlined in the book, and there's stuff in the book that we may not get to here today as well. But just want to encourage you as a supplementary point of view here. You can download that here, and I'll leave that up for a second. I'll take it away and I'll put it back later too. But while people are scanning that QR code, which you can scan in front of you, and I'll include a link in the description below for those that aren't watching this on video, could you maybe share an example of a company that you've worked with that got digital transformation, maybe and I hate to say in a simple way, because these are never simple, but could you maybe simplify or summarize for us why that company was successful, and tell us what they did different than companies that often fail?
Yeah, sure. So so had a client, is a university that I worked with a few years ago, and I think they had IBM or someone in there. And, I just said to them, I said, look, let's look at your data. They had 300 and some odd spreadsheets that was maintaining the student records and courses and everything else. Why it was 300, I always remember that number, 348 spreadsheets. And you're like, that is mental. And they had SAP as well, which is really scary. But so it didn't do this job very well. And it was literally, give us all this data and let's try and find out all of our columns that we're using and why they're important, and go through with each person, say, highlight in red what's your most important columns that you can't live without. And then, and come to find out that almost all of them were the same. And because they talked to each other, but they never really shared spreadsheets and stuff. So it was kind of funny to see that and say, well, you guys are pretty much following the same thing almost, some slight different names and stuff. But to bring them all together is very quick and easy. Brought them into SQL Server, and then just started doing some scripts on that and comparing it. And it was much, much simpler, because they were just running around like chickens, with the head cut off. And they were like, we don't know how to do this. We don't know what the best place to start. Where do I start? And, and that's what can be overwhelming about data when you first see it, because don't forget as well, you see it on a screen. We see it in linear sort of flat files, right? That we know connect through what's called primary keys and foreign keys, right? So we know that a customer number is a primary key, links to the orders table, primary key, customer number. So it's our foreign key, customer number, and then primary key is the order number, right? So we know that, and we know how to get to that picture very, very quickly to then be able to say, this data is in that shape or this shape or whatever. But and they found that, it much, much quicker, because no one from the SI really sat them down and explained to them, this is the way you should approach it. But again, see, getting someone in, a consultant, even if it's for a few days, can open up a whole world of, just make things so much clearer for you, right? Give you a new pair of glasses, or give you a new recipe sheet because that one's got spillage all over it and you can't read it now. So,
right.
Yeah.
No, I love it. The more we talk about the cooking slash, even though I'm a terrible cook, by the way, I'm the worst cook in the world. I can almost guarantee that of everyone listening, including yourself, Brett, I'm probably the worst cook. But so I shouldn't be. Maybe that's why I like the metaphor so much, because I don't know what I'm doing in the kitchen. So if I have a recipe, it makes it that much better. But I think it's true. I mean, you think about too, the time it takes to prepare, when you've got the recipe, what you need to go to the store and buy, what equipment you need in the kitchen, that sort of thing. And what I think a lot of organizations do, though, is they, continuing with this metaphor, that they bring in the cooks or the chefs, before they even have considered what the recipe is or what it is they're going to make or what ingredients they need. And then the cooks and chefs are billing by the hour. In this case, the software vendors are billing by the hour while you're trying to figure out, wait, what raw materials do I need? What do I need to do? Where's the equipment? How do I bring everything I need into the kitchen? And that's where I think a lot of organizations fall flat. But you also talked about collaboration here in Afra from LinkedIn has a good comment that the partnership with the business is so important. So, this can't just be an IT driven project. I mean, you've got to have business involvement. Would you agree with that, Bret?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you need them. Like I said, the SME is probably the most important person in your project next to the budget holder, right? So they're quite important to have them along for the ride, because nothing's going to get at the end of the day, I've been here many times where you get to the end, signatures, please. Right, are you happy with all the testing and everything that's gone forward? No, I'm not. Why not? Well, because no one explained this and this to me. That's new. It's what? Yeah, oh, you mean that? Oh, okay. Well, I didn't have it explained to me like that. So you need them every step of the way, because if you lose them at any point, get to that signature and they won't sign it, because they're like, well, no, you haven't proven that to me. Sorry. So you need them every step of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's either Matt or MAAT, I'm not sure which, on YouTube says this is new digital fascism. That's the best explanation for your granny. And I actually love this. I actually made a note here when I saw this come in. I'm actually going to steal this idea, Matt, if you don't mind, or MAAT. This is a great idea for a YouTube video. Digital fascism. It's going to be the.
Oh yeah. Oh, there we go. See what ChatGPT comes up with that. Give me 10 ideas around this concept.
Yeah, digital fascism. Yeah. I never heard that term, but I love it.
That's great.
It's funny though, but that is something that many grandmothers could probably relate to.
Yeah.
So when we look at failure, then why digital transformations fail, why organizations fail when they're implementing technology. Again, this is your grandmother asking the question. Why is that? Why is it so hard for organizations to adapt new technology?
I think the main thing is, excuse me, because, three things really. They didn't understand the technology, or they didn't understand their full business from a group perspective. And as always, it's all about the data. They didn't understand their data and how that's actually going to work for them. And, you can get every SI under the planet who's done thousands of these transformations, and because you're different, and because they rely, well, not different from what they've done, but because they rely on your signature, you're paying the bill, you got to sign off the milestones, they're going to look to you for a lot. And having your own team that you select of professional, whether that be contractors or business people, will really stand you in good stead, because then at least you can face off against that and say, well, okay, let my expert answer that. Oh no, it's this and this and this. I've done that many times. A lot of SIs probably won't hire me because I'm always for the customer, and I'm always saying, right, you got to do that because it says so in the statement of work. It's like, where did you get that from? So, and it's very, that's very key.
Yeah, exactly. What about, here's a question from Darian on LinkedIn. What advice would you give to managers about balancing day-to-day operations with the demands of a digital transformation project? Because just to back up for a second to set the context, I mean, in fact, I was just meeting before we came live here on this interview. I was meeting with a potential client where I'm traveling here this week. And that was one of the concerns they had, is like, we have a business to run. We've got our day-to-day operations, and at the same time now we're just adding this big project to the workload of our team. How do you advise in a simple way how to best balance that? And why is it so important to have that right mix of internal resources?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, if you got like a 2 month or a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month window, try and get some ideas down on not only just the requirements that you're going to want to put in, but also as well as where the finance team or the business team have issues with data, where that's, meet with your security team and say, how many composite roles and things do you think we should have? And Can you get me a matrix for that? Try and do enough to where they can just work on it a little bit. So maybe have a weekly catch up, just to say, where are you getting on with your tasks that you have to do for the security model, for instance, which is your roles and your access levels and things like that. And, just kind of pull that together, and data as well is list out the elements. I think the more you preempt, and if you get some juniors in, or you get some people in the team that you can divvy up those key people's responsibilities, that will stand you in good stead. Because like I said to you, the SMEs will be pulled from pillar to post, and you really need that. And again, bring in a core consultant team, like maybe 3 or 4 people, one as the program manager, and then get somebody on testing, someone on data, and someone on requirements, so it can help the business understand, and also as well as help backfill to help them out, because like I said, they would have done this many times before. And once they know your direction and where you're going and what you've got already, if you have any older requirements or things like that, or you've got a wish list, they can help bring that to life. So that's quite key. Like I said, it's a little bit of money spent up front, but you know what? It will pay loads of dividends in the end, and you will get less change requests, less problems with data migration, less problems with testing and all those things. If you just get those key people, and testing has to be at the beginning as well, because that's so ideal and so important to bring that in. So they just got an idea, the whole scope, and they can start working out scenarios, and maybe even start working on some automation, start getting that ready, right? So they can front load customers, orders, all those sorts of things. So there's a bit clearer way of thinking. I think those sort of things will help out with immensely.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And what about? Sorry, I just lost my question that I had ready to ask you. Speaking of, you were talking about that time to investing in time that's going to save you time and money later. What about when we talk about the planning process, the upfront planning for a project? Why is that so important, and how does that impact a digital transformation, the upfront planning piece?
Yeah, the upfront planning, you have to know that, okay, so in the 3 months, we're going to do all these things, and here's a list of the things that we need to do and the tasks and things. Day one, when the troops rock up, what do they need? They're going to need some data, because your developers are going to start, configuring, they're going to start putting things together. So they need to know what that data is, because if they don't, and they run against the question, that SME, hey, what do you want for this? What do you want for that? And then somebody else is going to say, hey, we connect with HR. We need you over here to tell us about these things. So you need to sort of get that professional to help you. Okay, this is what's going to happen on day one. Month one's going to be roughly like this. Month two, like this. I mean, I try and get, if we can get, like Data Worx Global, if we come in and we did a pre-clean on your data, sort of thing, I like to try and run the first data migration workbench on like SAP, for instance, S4HANA, within the first couple of weeks. Just say, right, okay, press a button, let's see what falls out, right? What do you got to lose? And just keep testing that. But just kind of get a schedule where it's kind of a little bit loose, but, someone that knows what they're doing, like Eric and myself, we can sort of map out roughly how things are going to pan out and fall, roughly within a couple of weeks of where you're going to need things and how you should shape it, so, and that's key to get that plan in a skeleton sort of format, because your SI is going to try and rock it, maybe push back. If you can apply the statement of work to that plan, that helps. So then you can kind of sort of gauge with your PID, project initiation document, or just how are you going to approach this, Mr. Businessman, if I choose this SI? What's your approach, and how do you work? And they might be able to give you some stuff that would help fit over top of that plan.
Right. Now, what about when we look at not just our own grandmothers, but let's go look to the workplace and look at our coworkers, our colleagues, our superiors, our peers, our subordinates. All these different people throughout the organization are probably less tech savvy than you or I might be, or a lot of the more technical people on the call might be. So what are some of the best ways to simplify the benefits of digital transformation to an employee who's not tech savvy?
I always use the analogy. Okay, so like I did at the beginning. When your finance team takes 2-3 weeks to sort out month end, very painful, very time consuming, and then week 4 they're back on the finance stuff, right? So you can't ever get their time. It's really, really difficult. And I always say that find the pain points where you're experiencing these type of pains, and you kind of give them to them, because you can almost guess, right? Well, it comes from experience. It's not really guessing, but you can kind of bring to them to the fore. You're probably experiencing this. Yep, doing that. And what about this? Yep, always doing that. And what about your security model? Oh God, it's so hard to get the right mix of credentials and access set up. And what about it? Oh yeah, they always run the wrong report. That's what's always getting us. They always run the wrong one. Well, take it out, right? So don't let them run that anymore. Oh yeah, but if we do that, then so and so who still uses it, but they only get this bit of information from it, still will probably use it, right? So it's the old adage that I always experience, like, well, just switch it off and see who screams. So it's like you switch it off, it's like, oh, so and so halfway across the world still uses that report, right? So yeah, you get a lot of that, but
yeah, that's a great point. Now, what about the benefits of digital transformation then? So if we're focusing on what it can do, for people that are resisting change, let's just say we're dealing with employees in our organization, they're not on board with the change, they don't want to change, as imperfect as the old legacy systems and processes might be, people are comfortable with that, for better, for worse, and it sometimes is hard for them to change. So how do you simplify the why should we go through a digital transformation, or why should I support the digital transformation?
Yeah, do you know what I get a lot, Eric? I get a lot of people saying, I think this is going to replace my job. So why should I participate in this? I say, hey, no, that's no problem. Look, I can help you find the area where you might be able to get another job in the same company, but we'll just sidestep you, So, and that's the hard one, is trying to replace someone, right? They think the software is going to replace them. It's like again, back to the finance. You're taking 2 to 3 weeks to do the previous month end. You've probably got an extra 3-4 bods in your team. Of course, if you're no longer having to do that, if we take that away from you, what's these 3 or 4 people going to? Well, we'll probably make them redundant. Okay, well, and then you got to try and reuse them, somewhere else in the business. But I think it's taking away the pain. Look, this will answer that. This will take this away. And I think that's what a lot of SIs do, is they get into the sales room because they're dealing with the salesy people, in the sense that we have to sell to this person. So they're showing you all the whizzy reports. They're showing you all the great things about it, how you can access it via your mobile and, halfway across the world. And you don't need to do this anymore, because that will run it for you into BI or Snowflake or whatever application you're using, right? So it's kind of like that. But I think for the intermediate managers, how am I going to cope with this? What do I need to know? What do I need to do? And I think if you're training the people you bring on for the training, if they're worth anything, and I always encourage people when I show up on site, so, have you checked out the SAP, help.sap.com? Have you checked that out? There's tons of information on there. Have you checked out SAP, where they've got tons of videos and courses for free and all this different information that, might at least give you some insights, right? So I don't try and reinvent the wheel. I try and use what's already there. And, I've got a lot of resources in that as well that I always call on. There's loads of people on LinkedIn saying, oh, here's how you run the SD process, or this is how the sales process, or this is how you run the Dunning run in finance, and they've done a guide, right? And you can take that into chat to like Notebook ALM and say, make me make me a step guide for this on 1-page A4 so I can give to my team, and boom, there it is. So you're using AI and bringing all that into it and helping do the same thing, helping your colleagues out as well. So yeah, I think that's the main secret, Eric, is when someone's got passion for what they're doing, like you, me, and others as well, we've got the passion, it kind of infuses people like, yeah, I'm on board with these people. They know what they're talking about. Okay, cool. It's not so scary. Right, cool. And some will sit back and say, okay, I'm going to watch you guys. Yeah, you're very, you pull people in, you're leading us away, and, Okay, but I'm just going to watch the back door and just make sure no one's trying to sneak anything in on us, So, and you'll get those people. You can't please everyone, right? So you just have to, keep positive, keep speaking to them positively, draw them in, bring them in as much as you can. And once they start putting their hand up and being part of it, hey, problem solved, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what about culture? Every organization has a unique culture, a different culture, and it may sound like it has nothing to do with digital transformation, but it does. How would you describe or simplify how a company's culture is influenced by or influences digital transformation?
Yeah, I think as well. It's how you do, because I notice things about universities are really laid back and yeah, man, whatever, and yeah, it happens over here. You go see that person and I'll get to it. And I find as well they're the most strictest of jobs. Look, don't talk to me unless you've gone through that person first. And you gotta just again, it helps having a really good team who's got very positive attitude and you can read the room and say, right, okay, this is not going to work. I can't be too heavy with these people, but these people over here, I can just, look, we need this, you just got to be able to fit around everyone, right? You're not going to please everyone, so don't freak out, but you are going to have to try and bring them online. And I find one-on-ones, what do you find about this that's upsetting you? What do you find? Sometimes you're a bit of not just a consultant on ERP, you're also a consultant with, personal feelings, like you mentioned, Eric, with the previous question. You got to try and bring those people along. So you just got to find out look, that just doesn't set well with me. Okay, cool, fine. How do we approach it? Keep it open door, keep the comm lines open, and just keep, pushing it forward, but you know where to push hard and where to push softly, and how to appease everyone. And unfortunately, that's where, or fortunately, that's where you get people like like professional consultants that can come in and help you. Don't necessarily have to be a SAP or Oracle; those can be quite expensive. But someone who's done plenty of them and who's got the right people skills can help bring the team together and can fit various different cultures, like offshore models, onshore, disparate teams, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Makes sense. Now, what about this is another question from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, how do you gather and prioritize feedback about employee pain points to guide your digital transformation efforts?
Yeah, I think a forum, start out. I've seen people sometimes do one online saying, hey, we got an intranet page set up. We're doing a digital transformation, as you guys know about, talked about it for weeks. We'd really like to get your feedback. And again, a consultant, or you can go out and, find various different things online that say, what are some really good questions to ask. I've just done, in the middle of finishing one where someone's asked for like a chatbot, and we programmed the chatbot to ask various questions. That's what we're doing now, and saying, hey, okay, so what part of the business you work in? Finance. Okay, cool. Here's some topics. What do you want to discuss mostly? I want to discuss, time, or I want to discuss, manual extra work we have to do, or, whatever, right? And you get them to start communicating through that AI assistant, who can then start feeding in all these different elements. So you can say, oh yeah, okay, cool. So at least then you kind of know, and you're asking them in the comfort of their own sort of office space, rather than, getting them to put their hand up in a meeting room with 30, 40 people, which a lot of people won't necessarily speak out. But if you give them something like a AI assistant or chatbot, or whatever you want to call it nowadays, and yeah, use that. I'm trying to get more into that and creating those for projects, because I think that's just going to save so much time and effort. And you can implement that at any time, even if you're going to be doing this in a year's time, right? Going through the transformation, at least you've got some knowledge and you've got some experience and you've got some feedback that will really help champion your project. And just ask questions in their terms, right? Their lingo.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I'm going to pull up one more time here. I'm going to pull up the QR code to download our book called Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. It's a pretty quick read. It's meant to be simple. It gives you 20 different things that successful digital transformations and ERP projects do differently than the ones that fail. So I'll leave that up for a second. Scan the QR code. I'll include a link below. But I'm going to ask the audience, and then I'm going to ask you the same sort of capstone closing question here, Bret. And that is, if you were to actually, I'm going to ask you a two-part question. I'll ask the audience too. If you were to pick 3 simple steps that any organization can take to start their digital transformation journey, what would it be? And I'm curious to hear from the audience too. You don't have to give me 3, but just give me 1 or 2. But for you, Bret, I'll ask you for 3. The audience too. But what are the 3 things that a company could do to simplistically get started in a way that makes sense?
I think the main thing is get on top of your data. Know what your data is doing, because your data is going to feed everything. Okay, your data is going to feed your requirements. It's going to feed your config. It's going to feed, your business processes. So why does that data get like that? Oh, that's because the process is messed up. Can we make that a required field? Okay, it's a process, but now you wanted a required field. Excuse me. So that's a config. So it's that. So if you can get on top of your data, that's going to answer a huge amount of questions, and it's going to feed your requirements, it's going to feed your business processes, right? And that's key, because you need that. And I think that's probably the main one. And again, your business processes, your requirements, because what happens in the program 3 months in, 3-4 months in, all of a sudden, hang on a minute, this is not working. This data is not working. Okay, we need to simplify that. Oh, well, okay, that's a change request maybe, potentially, or we need a new field. Right, what's that going to do to this? So then you need everybody feeding in to say, what's the impact of that? Do you have any impact to that CR? We're going to raise that CR. See what I mean? So all of a sudden, then you start getting all these CRs in because you didn't look at your data before you started, because then it just kind of makes more sense to you. And that's kind of the key. Data, your processes, and of course, your culture has to come into it, your people, and knowing that as well, I think.
Data, processes, people. Those are the kind of the 3 that you'd summarize as far as the keys to success. Fercho on YouTube agrees, at least on the process definition piece. So Fercho says process definition is the most important. So thanks for that comment there, Fercho. And I agree with you, by the way. I think data, process, people, I think those are 3 really good ones. Now, here's my real capstone closing question for you, Bret. And this is, if you had to sum up digital transformation success in 1 sentence, what would it be? You talked about the 3 things, but if you had to sort of summarize now, you talk about the 3 steps that an organization can do to get started, but how would you sum up digital transformation in 1 sentence?
Digital transformation, I think in 1 sentence is, for me, is getting the right people on board, whether that be internally or externally, is going to pay huge dividends. And those right people externally are going to know about data. They're going to know about the processes and about what's already been configured and your objects and all that. And your business, where do you want to now go? If we could alleviate any pain points, what would they be for your department, right? So that's to me is probably the key one.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's my definition. If I were to put it the same kind of concept into my own words, I'd say, it's the use of process technologies and people to improve your business. So it's part technology. I think the word digital in digital transformation is misleading because it makes it, it's technology, right? It's like, well, sort of it is, but it's really not. I mean, more of the effort should be going into the other stuff, but I think that's the trouble we all have with digital transformation is we think digital in our heads, but really it's people, process, strategy, culture, data. It's all this other stuff that doesn't really have a lot to do with the software or the technology itself. Good stuff. So how can people learn more about you, connect with you, learn more about Dataworks? What's the best way to go about that?
Hit me up on LinkedIn, Bret Robbie, or go to dataworxglobal.com and book a chat. We can book a call and have a chat about your potential situation. I think as well, even if you started down the transformation road, how do you pull it back in? Because what I've experienced on many transformations is the data is taking ages and it's holding everybody up. How can we accelerate that? What can we do? What tools can we use? Try and steer clear. I've just had some nightmares recently with SDS, SAP Data Services. Oh my goodness. So yeah, there's definitely some steep learning curves on some of these tools and some of these things that people just fly off the cuff with. So yeah, just really kind of do some homework. But yeah, reach out to me and ask me, say, oh, this company's telling me this and this and this. What do I need to go back with? Or what should I answer back? Yeah, just hit me up on LinkedIn, connect with me, and I'll be happy to, or Bret at dataworxglobal.com. That's works, WORX, global.com. Just give me an email and I'll be happy to, help you out. Yeah, whatever you need. As long as it doesn't take me a week or something to do.
Because you two have a real job.
Oh, yeah.
As well. But
yeah, exactly, right.
Well, good. And right before I let you go and thank the audience here, I want to get to one last audience point because I think this is really a good closing statement here. This is from Fercho again. Fercho's on a roll on YouTube.
It is.
Comments in a row here. But Fercho says the definition of digital transformation that this person chooses to use is reshaping the business model to solve a problem with the use of technology. Which I kind of like that because it's a business. You're focused on the business model. You're focused on technology as an enabler, and within the business model, obviously that includes your operations, your processes, your data, your people, a lot of other pieces. But I think it's a good, interesting summary. So thanks for that comment, Fercho.
Yeah.
So, well, good. Well, thanks for being here today, Bret. Really appreciate it. Thank you to the audience for being here. Great questions. Keep an eye out for this formal official podcast episode to get released here in a couple of weeks. Go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the past episodes that we've done. You can keep up with current episodes. You can also go to that same website and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you prefer, whether it's YouTube or Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever. So be sure to check that out. Go to transformationgroundcontrol.com. We do these live interviews, same time, same place every week on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. So be sure to check us out every week, same time, same place. You can learn more about Third Stage Consulting by going to thirdstage-consulting.com. And I'll put up one last time the QR code for the book, Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. It's, again, probably the simplest piece of thought leadership and the most comprehensive piece of thought leadership that we put out in terms of trying to take a short book and lay out 20 core tenets or principles of what it takes to be successful in digital transformation.
Yeah.
So
it's a good book. It's a good book. It's like your dummy's guide almost. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
it's getting that way.
we might as well have called it Lessons for Digital Transformation Lessons for Your Grandmother. That could have been the title.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that title until you.
And then the slug line, how to get a better recipe.
Right. Exactly. Well, good. Well, thanks again, everyone, for being here today. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Bret. Hope everyone has a great week, and we'll see you next time. Have a great week in the